Good mornings, good mornings. It is right now 8:15 in the morning, and I am going to give you a quick rundown, well, as quick as I can rundown, because last video I made was about 40 minutes long, so it wouldn't let me send it to you. So I gotta make this video a lot more shorter. I'm gonna use this pause button more often, so that way I can gather my thoughts and tell you what's going on. But anyway, let's just go ahead and get into it. I have the background, this is going to be the video, but the background information about Iceland and things that you just basically need to know before you travel out there. So I'm going to go over like some history, some cultural things you need to know, and some kind of like little tidbits that you need to, that I think you should be mindful of when you travel out there. So to start off with, you will be flying into Keflavik, and that's kind of what you told me to, and I have your camper rental being taken out of Keflavik. So if you do decide to change that, you need to let me know as soon as possible so I can find you a different camper van as to where you're going. Because there are 13 total airports in Iceland. So I guess I have you flying into Keflavik, which is near the capital. I'm not going to bother pronouncing it. By the way, in this video, I will be pronouncing things wrong. I am not, repeat, not going to figure out how to pronounce made-up letters. It's not happening. So, quick little things to know. 13 airports in Iceland. There are also 10,000 waterfalls in Iceland. Okay? On this trip, I have you going to see some of these things, these waterfalls, and a lot of them, like I said, they're pretty much, I'm not going to say they're all the same, but a lot of them are very similar, very small, something like that, not really that important. But I did put on this this map, the ones that I think you definitely need to go see, because you're never going to see anything like it anywhere else, and they are actually probably one of the most famous waterfalls. Like there's one called Waterfall of the Gods. That one I definitely think it's freaking huge, and some of them even look like little teacups that are coming off of each other. Like, so it's like one waterfall that's turning into the next one. But I did put some of them on that I think you need to go see. However, if you happen to be like on your trip and you want to stretch your legs and you happen to see like, oh, there's a waterfall nearby, then go ahead and go see it. But yeah, there's no way I'm gonna have you stop off and see 10,000 waterfalls. Ain't happening. There are also about 130 volcanoes in Iceland. 30 of them are active. There are 2 that I'm going to have you go see on this trip, and that I think are pretty important. And one of them is the one that recently erupted. So pretty sure you're safe to go see that one, but that's just how active they are. The most recent one erupted in 2010. So I will definitely talk about that one for you as well. Also, along your road trip, you're going to see a lot of signs for lighthouses. Just so you know, there are 104 lighthouses in Iceland along the coastline, and 80 of them look the same. Okay? Trust me, as on taking you along this trip, I checked out every single one of them just to click on them to see what it looked like. None of them are like oldish or like historic. They're all pretty modern, built within the last, 50 years or so. So as far as worth going to see, it's up to you if you want to see a lighthouse, but to me, if it were me, I wouldn't bother. All right, so let me get into some quick history for you to know about Iceland. One guy that you need to know, there's several like people out there, but a lot of them are poets. A lot of fucking poets. They all did all their writings. In fact, there are 2 history books of the written sagas written. So anyway, Iceland, they didn't write anything down. They didn't. So their history books are literally all recollections of like basically a collection of stories that the people heard throughout their life, throughout history, and that have just been retold. And they just put it all into a book. I can't remember what it's called, but there are 2 of them. One is a book of just sagas, so just the tales, right? The second one is a book of sagas, how they were written, and how you yourself can become a poet. So one's like an epic one, and the other one's a different one. But yeah, those are the 2 books that they have for Icelandic history before anything was written down. One of the guys I want to talk to you about that I thought was very interesting, his name is Hrafna Floki Vilgerdarson. Again, I'm going to pronounce these things wrong. He was in my notes here I have that he was a Viking. He's from the 9th century. he was a Norseman from Norway. He intentionally sailed. He's one of the very few that intentionally sailed to Iceland. A lot of them kind of happened upon it by accident. He intentionally went there. He sailed in 868. He was in search of land for his family. They came from Western Norway, then they went to the Shetland Islands, and they stopped off at the Faroe Islands to make it to Iceland. While along the trip, he had his 2 daughters and his 1 wife. I don't think he had any sons, but one of his daughters died, I think, on the Shetland Islands, and then the other daughter got married in the Faroe Islands. While he was in those islands, he picked up 3 ravens. He started heading back out to sea, and he released the ravens to find Iceland. 1 raven went back to the Faroe Islands, so they didn't follow that one. The second raven went up and then came right back down to the boat. So there was that one. The third one, the final one, started flying northwest, so they followed him because he didn't return. So he goes, okay, that bird must know where to go. So he's the one they followed. So they get to Iceland, and it's like the end of winter when they get there, so things are starting to liven up a little bit to be able to build a house and all that kind of stuff to settle there. And a year goes by, winter's coming again. Winters are out there are very harsh, and they're by the way in like the western fjords. So they are, if you look at my little map, all the way up in here. They're up in here somewhere. And they set up camp, and they realize like, wow, everything's like kind of dying out here. It's really hard to live out here. So he's like, well, maybe there's somewhere better we can go that's on this island. He climbs to the highest mountain, which they believe may have been Nonfell in the West Fjords. And he saw a large fjord just full of drift ice. So he's like, shit, this place is Iceland. So he's the one who names it Iceland, contrary to the story that I've heard, which was they named Greenland because they wanted to trick people to go there instead of coming to Iceland. Not true. Not true at all. That's not how Iceland and Greenland got their names. So, this Floki guy, he thought the whole island was like worthless. He actually goes back to Norway. Just him and a couple of his friends go back home to Norway. And his friends there are asking him about it. He's like, oh yeah, how's the island that you went to? Like, where'd you travel to? And he's like, oh yeah, land, completely worthless. His friends think otherwise, but he thought it was completely worthless. Well, anyway, he goes back home and he settles there with his family. He goes back home to a settlement with his family, where his family's at, and he lives the rest of his days there. On this trip, I do have you going to see this. There's this statue, I guess. It's a giant rock. It looks like a dildo sticking out of the stone dildo sticking out of the ground, and it has 3 birds on it, and it's dedicated to this guy, Hrafna Floki, because Hrafna is actually Icelandic for raven. So they named him Raven Floki because he used the ravens to find Iceland. Okay, so like I said, he's just one of the guys that I think is someone that you could probably look up and just kind of do like a little quick background study of him. I gave you kind of like a brief rundown of his travels. Another thing I want to talk to you about is the Hoodoo folk. This is where there's like a lot of folklore out there. They still have paganistic beliefs out there. In fact, it's incorporated into some of their laws. I'll go into that for you just a bit. But one thing you know is about something called the Hoodoo folk, which is the hidden people. These are basically elves in Icelandic and Faroese folklore. They make themselves visible at will, which is why they're called the hidden folk. They are also called, the Icelandic word for elves is alfar, but they use Hoodoo folk because they don't want to say alfar. It's almost like you don't want to speak them into existence kind of thing. Like if you talk about them, they'll show up, and then they cause mischief and stuff like that sometimes. In the Faroese folktales, they are seen as large. They have large build, like they're just really like almost like human size, almost maybe a little bit shorter. They wear gray clothes, have black hair, and they live in the mounds of like stones of like they had like a little saying. It was like, hey, don't throw stones because you might hit an elf, because like I said, they're hidden and you can't see them. So if you were like outside like throwing stones just for fun or something like that, you might hit one of them and piss them off. And then like I said, they will come after you. They will come in, they'll steal your food, they'll mess up your stuff, kind of like the elf on a shelf type business. Yeah, they are to the extreme in Icelandic culture. Another popular thing that they believe in are trolls. Trolls, they lived in the mountains, and they only came down from the mountains to forage for food at night. If they were caught in the sunlight, they would turn to stone. So while you're driving around this island, you are going to see little stops for these famous stones that they believe to be trolls that were turned to stone, that were caught in the sunlight. One of the famous ones that you'll probably see that I have on your places to go to is the famous one, Grilla, which I'm pretty sure you probably heard in, like, maybe Sam's heard of him or her in, like, his games or something like that he plays. So I'm pretty sure you've heard of Grilla. She was known to eat the naughty children, and she mainly famously came out around Christmas time. So during the month of December, kids would be well behaved, because if they were misbehaved, then the parents would say, like, oh, I'll throw you outside so that the Grilla, the troll, will come out and eat you. So it kept them in line. One of the important things to know about this is the reason why they had these stories. One, it was to prevent children from wandering away from human habitations. You did not want a kid getting lost out there and then not be able to find their way home. If they did, then they'd tell stories like, oh yeah, so-and-so, instead of saying like, oh, they ran away, no, they got eaten by a troll. And that would keep the other kids in line, saying like, oh crap, I better never, try to go off on my own, because I myself might get kidnapped and eaten by a troll. It also taught the Icelandic people about I can never say this right, topographical history. They obviously did a lot of exploration, and they would, kind of seek out the land to see what they could find, waterfalls, mountains, forests even. They would use these stories of the Hudafolk and the trolls to talk about their Icelandic lands. And the third thing is, the reason why they told these stories was to instill fear and respect for the powers of nature. They have 130 volcanoes, okay, and mountains that would crumble like a stone. Like there was the only way to explain these things that happen in nature, like snowfall and like freezing of the waters and stuff like that, was to use these ideas of elves and trolls. It was the only way they could explain. It's like, oh, what is that? What is that thunderous noise outside? Oh, that's Thor summoning lightning, or that's a troll rolling down the mountain at night. This was how they described, were able to explain to their children, to the people, what was going on in nature. Another good place we're going to talk about, speak of the devil, Thor. There's a mountain that I wanted you to go see. It's called Thor's Mark, and it's a hiking mountain that's named after Thor. This is where you're going to find the two of the volcanoes that I want you to go see. And one of them is, Eyjafjallajökull, whatever. Can't pronounce it. Starts with E. It's a glacier. It's of Elijahful, whatever. It's a stratovolcano or composite volcano, meaning this kind of volcano, it has explosive eruptions. So it's like an ice cap. And so if you go to the top, there's like a big hole. It looks like the size of a crater because it's covered with snow. Well, when it erupts, because the hole's so big, it splatters. So it just like kind of shoots out like fireworks kind of thing. It doesn't go like straight up. It doesn't just start overflowing. No, it's like nasty explosions. It looks like, shit flying from Satan's asshole. It's just splatters, goes everywhere, and then the lava will just, kind of come down the sides. But it's very violent, I should say. This is the one that erupted in 2010, and it like disrupted air travel across the northern and western part of Europe for a week. So like I said, that's probably like the most recent active erupted volcano that they have. Next to it is another ice cap subglacial volcano. This one is called, well, in English it's Myrdal Glacier. In Icelandic they call it Mýrdalsjökull. I don't know. It's an ice cap, and it's on a larger top of the Katla volcano. Okay, a Katla volcano is Katla means kettle, and so it's a type of volcano. It's a form of volcano, and this is also an active volcano. But they have no worries about this one exploding anytime soon. So another part of their history is these. You're gonna go. I have on your trip caves of Hella. So these are man-made sand caves. Okay, these are like the oldest standing buildings in Iceland, because again they are man-made. These were there before the Vikings even got there. They believe that they were made by possibly Celtic monks that arrived there before the Vikings, and there are like over 200 caves in this southern part of Iceland. They are safe to walk through. They do tours and stuff like that to go through them. And inside these sand caves, they have churches and just beautiful rooms that you can kind of go into. It kept them from the cold, and they were like very strong and withstanding. I'm not sure what this. I'm pretty sure if I looked it up, I could tell you what the sand was made out of, like where they got this from. But yeah, they just kind of like made these. That's how they made their own shelter when they got there, because it was so cold, and they just kind of like dug out these caves. But they made like statues of them and stuff like that, and they're like all these different type of rooms, and they're, like I said, they're caves, so they kept you safe from the cold and stuff like that. And they would live in there. They would have sheep in there. They had other livestock. They kept in these sand caves, and then they would also, when during the springtime, they would obviously come out of the caves and do some foraging or growing, some crops, whatever. But then, of course, when the harsh winters came, they would, harvest that food, keep inside the sand caves to survive during the winter. So it's really cool stuff. There's actually a Netflix show called Entrapped, and it was filmed in these caves. Another thing I have on this trip, you're gonna find actually throughout the whole island, are turf houses. They don't really build these anymore now that they're a little bit more modern. Also, they don't really last very long. They last for maybe about a century until they are no good to live in, and they have a high risk of collapsing. One of the ones I do want you to go see, because like I said, you're going to see them everywhere. These turf houses, they're just kind of lined up. Some people still live in them because they're actually built recently within the last century. But you're not going to find a lot of places or people living in them anymore. You're going to find a lot of abandoned ones and a lot probably that are collapsed. One I want you to go see is the oldest church in Iceland. This one is a turf church. It's closed. You can't go inside of it. It's closed for preservation, and also it's very risky to go in there now because it has reached a point where it's like, hey, at any moment, if someone just like bumps into the right stone, it will collapse and people will die. But you can still peek into the windows to look into it. The notes I have on it was because I know like some of these places have like plaques or whatever that are in Icelandic. Not all of them are in English. So if you can Google it while you're out there, if you have Wi-Fi, which you probably won't, these are just some like little tidbits about the church. The church is called, you'll see it on the sign, Grafar Kirja. And this one, it was built in like the 16th century. It was deconsecrated in 1765 by the royal order of the king to use as a storeroom by farmers. At some point, they were going through a war or whatever, and they're like, "Hey, we need as much resources as we can have, and I need these farmers who are fighting for me to have a storeroom for like all their food and stuff like that. We're going to use this church for that." So deconcentrated in 1765, and that's what it was used for. Finally, it was reconsecrated by another monk in 1953. And this church could seat 30 people. So it was in a small town. So people would come like travel from their farms to go sit and have a congregation. There's also like a bunch of other things that I have not written down that I want you to go see, but I'll go about it when I go over the places that you'll be visiting, or the places that I listed as I think places you could visit along your trip. Again, I'm going to need you to let me know which ones you don't want to do. Here's a couple little tidbits for you to have when going there. Iceland, called Land of Fire and Ice. A lot of the places in Iceland were actually used for movie sets, where they filmed like Game of Thrones. In fact, I think there's like 2 places on here that I have for you to go visit that were used for the show. Tipping is not customary in Iceland when you go visit. Okay, so when you go to a restaurant, stuff like that, you might not find it necessary at all to tip, because it's probably they include their prices for service, food, and anything they need. It's all within the bill that you're getting. So if you happen to tip, I'm not gonna say like in Japan they would take it to offense, but they may just look at you like you're weird. Like, why are you paying more than what you need to for a meal? It's just it's something they do because there's not a whole lot of restaurants that are open in the wintertime. They're only open during the summertime because again, it's not tourist season. And like I said, they include what you owe, what's service, all that stuff. It's included in the price that you pay. So tipping is not necessary. The tap water out there, safe. Okay. In fact, it's very discouraged to bring plastic water bottles or to even buy them. They're trying to keep the plastic low out there. In fact, a lot of stores you go to will not have plastic water bottles. It is safe for you to bring your own container or your own water bottle, metal water bottle, and just fill it up with tap water that you see on the side of the road. They even have like these little pumps where people kind of like can wash their hands, stuff like that. It's tap water and it's safe to drink. Iceland has the purest water that you could ever find on Earth. It's not like Mexico where they say, hey, whatever, you don't drink the tap water here because it's unfiltered. Their water doesn't even need to be filtered in Iceland because it comes from the glaciers and there's no bacteria in it. Bacteria can't survive in it because it's too cold. So it's very safe to drink. Another thing is whale is served in the markets and restaurants, and I was like doing research on like the food that they serve there and stuff like that, like what's kind of like Icelandic cuisine. It's actually very important to them that tourists try whale because sorry, I just got a phone call and then a note came up. It's important that you try whale because it's part of their culture, and whaling is something that they do, and it's like a, what do you call it? It's a way of life and a way for them to make money. So you are supporting their way of life by eating whale and trying it in restaurants and stuff like that. Also, things to try would be that I'm looking forward to if I ever go to Iceland is fermented shark, puffin, which is the bird, and they have very good. I saw good reviews on their mutton, so that's something I would try if I were you. Things to kind of take into mind while you're on your travels, while you're out there traveling. They do have one-car bridges, quite a few of them. So just be mindful of that because you're going during tourist season. You're going to have some people that are tourists driving along with you. The one-car bridges are a thing. So just be careful. Just keep in mind that, hey, you may be coming up on a one-car bridge. So you might, again, stop to make sure that there's no one on the other side trying to cross over before you do. People have gotten into accidents because they don't realize, that there's a car coming across and they're like, oh shit, we need to back up. And they back up into the bridge and it just causes problems. So just keep that in mind. Another thing is, especially when you get to the southeastern side of Iceland, they have a lot of moss fields. These moss fields are formed from lava outputs, like lava fields, and then the moss grew on top of them. This moss took decades to grow, and it's very delicate. Do not touch it. Just don't. It's highly discouraged, and it's part of their ecosystem, especially for a lot of animals that are living out there, this moss. There are a lot of, I guess, creatures that live off of it or live in it and stuff like that. Don't touch it. Look at it. Don't touch it. You're probably going to see some assholes out there that are going to be touching it, and like, you're just like, oh, look at this moss, and they're taking chunks of it. Don't do it. It's frowned upon. They even have signs saying, hey, please respect the moss out here and stuff like that. It's very important to animals that live here to have it. Don't touch it. So in my next video, I'm going to, like I said, go over the places I'm going to have you start at. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to look up for you for Icelandic history and stuff like that, and I can do my best. But yes, as your tour guide, I will be going over some of these things in my next video. The next video I'm about to cut up into like segments because this one already is at 25 minutes long, and I don't think I can send anything longer than 30 minutes. So the other one's going to take me a lot longer. So I'm going to have more videos for that one. So stay in tune.